You've seen the bluebird at your feeder. Bright blue. Vivid orange chest. Sitting there like everything is fine. What you don't know is what that bird did last night. While you were inside, under blankets with the heat on. Because what your backyard birds do to survive a single winter night is one of the most extreme things happening in nature, and it's occurring 10 feet from your back door. Stay until the end. Because the last thing I'm going to tell you about these birds will change what you feel every time you see one at your feeder on a cold morning. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going inside the winter survival of your backyard birds, and specifically the eastern bluebird, a species that has no business being alive in January. We're going to look at three things: how these birds physically survive below zero temperatures, what they do together that their daytime behavior would make you believe is impossible, and what your yard's role is in all of it. Let's start with something most people get completely wrong. They assume that if a bluebird is in their yard in February, that bird simply stayed nearby. That it found a warm enough spot and waited. The actual situation is far more desperate than that. On a January night in the mid-Atlantic states, temperatures regularly drop to -10, -15, sometimes -20 degrees Celsius. And a bluebird weighs 28 grams. 28 grams is approximately the weight of 5 pennies. That object, that coin weight of feathers and bone, is generating enough heat every night to survive temperatures that would kill an unprotected mammal of the same size within hours. The bird manages this through a system of physiological responses that, when you understand them, look less like survival and more like engineering. The first is feather management. A bluebird in cold weather can fluff its feathers to trap a layer of warm air directly against its skin. It's essentially wearing a self-inflating down jacket. One that recalibrates in real time based on wind, temperature, and perceived threat. The insulation value of that feather layer, adjusted for body size, is comparable to high-performance winter gear developed for Arctic expeditions. A 28-gram bird is running thermal management that human engineers studied for decades to replicate. But feathers alone aren't enough. On the coldest nights, a bluebird tucks its bill under its wing, reducing the surface area of exposed skin by as much as 30%. It pulls one leg up into its belly feathers. It minimizes every possible point of heat loss. This is the bird you looked at through your window this morning and thought was just sitting there. It wasn't sitting. It was executing a survival protocol that took millions of years to develop, 10 feet from your kitchen window. But here's what changes everything. Feathers and posture can only do so much. On the nights when temperatures go below 15 below zero, a single bluebird alone runs the math and the math doesn't work. And so bluebirds do something that will completely change how you understand the bird you've been watching from your window. Something that contradicts everything you've seen it do between April and October. From spring to fall, the male eastern bluebird is one of the most territorial birds in North America. He will not tolerate another male within 30 feet of his nest box. He will chase. He will fight. He will spend energy he can't afford defending his boundary. That same bird, on a January night at -18 degrees, will squeeze himself into a nest box with 11 other bluebirds. Pressed against them. Sharing heat. Every territorial rule of spring completely suspended. Researchers in Virginia documented nest boxes containing 15 bluebirds on a single cold night. Birds that during the day wouldn't share a 30-centimeter perch were sharing a 15-centimeter cavity without apparent conflict. The calculation is simple and brutal. At extreme winter temperatures, shared body heat is the difference between waking up tomorrow and not waking up. The territorial rules of the breeding season are survival luxuries. In January there are no luxuries. This behavior, communal roosting for thermoregulation, has been documented in over 40 species of North American birds. But the bluebird is one of the most striking examples, precisely because of how aggressively territorial it is during the other 9 months. The nest box in your yard, the one you put up for breeding season, is not just a breeding structure. In January it may be a survival structure. The birds using it tonight aren't nesting. They're keeping each other alive. The bluebird shares its winter yard with another species that has solved the same problem in a completely different way. The black-capped chickadee. 11 grams. The weight of 2 pennies. And its strategy for surviving the night looks nothing like the bluebird's. The chickadee enters a state called regulated hypothermia. It deliberately lowers its own body temperature by up to 12 degrees Fahrenheit below its daytime baseline. Not accidental. Not dangerous. Controlled. Deliberate. Every night. Its metabolism slows dramatically. Heart rate drops. It stretches its fat reserves across the entire night. Without this process, a bird the weight of 2 pennies would exhaust its energy stores before 3 a.m. and not survive to morning. Here's the part that stays with you. Even in deep hypothermia, the chickadee is still monitoring. If something approaches the cavity where it's sleeping, its metabolism spikes in under 60 seconds. And it can fly. But that emergency arousal has a real cost. It burns fat reserves equivalent to more than an hour of normal metabolism. If it happens multiple times in one night, the bird may not have enough reserves to survive to dawn. A cat walking through your yard at midnight is not an inconvenience to that chickadee. It is a genuine threat. So the quiet yard you see when you look out your window at night isn't peaceful for these birds. It's operational. The stillness is the work. Every bird out there is actively managing a survival system that runs all night without stopping. And then there's the dark-eyed junco. The small slate-gray bird that appears in your yard every November and disappears every April. You've probably noticed it scratching at the ground under your feeder without knowing what it was doing. At night, juncos find the densest available vegetation, a thicket, a holly bush, the inner branches of a dense evergreen, and sleep pressed against the branch or trunk, using the plant itself as a windbreak. They orient toward the warmest microclimate in your yard with a precision that surprises researchers who track them. Cornell lab studies using temperature loggers show that the difference in air temperature between the inside of a dense holly bush and the open air 3 feet away can be 12 degrees Fahrenheit. The junco has found and memorized every warm microclimate in your yard within days of arriving in November. What this means is something most bird watchers don't fully internalize. Every plant in your yard is functional survival infrastructure. The holly bush you planted for decoration. The dense evergreen in the corner you've been meaning to trim. To a junco in January, those are life support systems. But everything I've described so far is happening inside your yard. What I'm about to show you is happening above your yard. On this night, while these birds sleep, twice a year the sky above your house fills with birds. Not dozens, not hundreds. On peak migration nights in spring and fall, the number of birds passing over a single point in the eastern United States can reach into the hundreds of thousands. And they're not exotic species from distant continents. Many of them are your birds. The bluebirds that didn't migrate, some of their species mates did. The robin that sings in your yard all summer left in October and flew 1,500 kilometers south. It's coming back now. At night. Above your house. They fly at night because cold air is more efficient for sustained flight. Because there are fewer aerial predators. And because they navigate by the stars, reading stellar patterns the way sailors did before GPS. A bluebird can orient itself using a star map it memorized as a juvenile. Researchers have also established that migratory birds perceive Earth's magnetic field visually, as directional information overlaid on everything they see, through a light-sensitive protein called cryptochrome in their eyes. They don't just feel magnetic north. They see it. For a bird flying over your roof at 3 a.m., the world doesn't look dark. It looks like a grid of navigational information. Stars above, magnetic field overlaid on everything, the lights of your neighborhood below as landmarks. The darkness you see from your window is not what the bird sees. Cornell Labs' Birdcast radar can track this in real time. What looks like a storm system moving across the eastern United States on certain spring nights isn't precipitation. It's birds. The biological mass of the migration is large enough to return a radar signal. This is happening right now. Above your neighborhood. The birds that will spend this summer in your yard, singing from your trees, visiting your feeders, are passing over you in the dark. Some of them have already decided your yard is their destination. So here's what your yard actually is on a cold winter night. It's not a decoration. It's not empty space. It's a survival system being used by animals with physiological capabilities that took millions of years to develop. The bluebirds in your nest box are sharing body heat through a suspension of every territorial instinct they have. The chickadee in the old woodpecker hole is running a metabolic system more precise than anything human engineers designed before the 20th century. The junco in your holly bush has memorized every warm corner of your yard. You've been living next to this for years without knowing the scale of what was happening. The next time you wake up at 3 a.m. and look out your window at the dark yard, you'll know. The stillness you see is not emptiness. It's the sound of extreme survival in progress. And here's something worth holding. Every feeder you've kept filled this winter, every nest box you didn't take down in October, every dense shrub you didn't trim into submission, those weren't just yard maintenance decisions. They were survival decisions for the birds using your yard tonight. There's one more thing. The eastern bluebird that came back to your specific yard this winter, it made a choice. It evaluated dozens of territories on its range and chose yours. That's not sentiment. That's documented behavior. Bluebirds show strong site fidelity. They return to the same breeding and wintering territories year after year, sometimes for their entire lives. The bird you've been watching at your feeder this winter has likely returned to your specific yard multiple years in a row. It knows your yard. It made a decision about it. And what you felt, that small, specific feeling of being glad to see it again this November, that instinct that this bird felt familiar, wasn't foolish. It was recognition. The bird knows your yard. And some part of you knew it came back. Tell me in the comments, do you have bluebirds staying in your yard this winter? And has one ever come back year after year to the same spot? I read every comment. I'll see you in the next one.